Hello everyone and welcome to the very first episode of our Stardust channel. This is the first of a series of videos in which we will be talking to various guests about the history of animation, past and present. We'll also be showing never before seen exclusive original animation art and tips for those who want to get into the industry or to improve their skills in storyboarding, design, and animation. So make sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on your alerts, sit back and just enjoy the show.
Welcome to Stardust.
Thank you for sticking around. My name is Roberto Albertini. I'm a comic book and animation art enthusiast, and today we will be talking animation with someone very special. Allow me to introduce to you animation director, producer, designer, and storyboard artist who has worked in the world of animation as well as live action on some of Hollywood's biggest blockbuster movies. He is the winner of the 1996 British Animation Awards for Children's Choice for Best Series, The Legends of Treasure Island Season 2, co-directed with his good friend and colleague Simon Ward Horner. He directed the Emmy Award-winning CGI series Peter Rabbit, Season 2, in which he was nominated for an Emmy Award 2 years in a row for Outstanding Direction on an animated program for all 56 episodes in 2015 and 16. Him and his studio, Stardust Pictures, were instrumental in producing sequence direction, design, liquor rail, animation, cleanup, and FX for Warner Brothers' 1996 Space Jam movie starring Michael Jordan. Among his many other works are DreamWorks' Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron, Simba, Legends of the Seven Seas, and a number of Disney majors. The 2019 live-action film Aladdin, starring Will Smith, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, Artemis Fowl, and Prince of Persia. Not forgetting Lionsgate's biggest franchise hit, The Hunger Games, as well as Warner Brothers' latest live-action hit, Tom and Jerry 2020. And the list of cool projects he worked on just goes on and on. Far too many to list in this intro. So without any further ado, please let me introduce to you Dino Athanassiou.
Wow, what an intro! Thank you. Well, nice to be speaking with you, Robbie. It's a real pleasure, and yeah, I'm very humbled by that intro. I have to say, and I'm almost speechless. So, but yeah, it's been a long journey for me. I mean, I started back in 1981, so it's been quite a journey of projects and animation, and it's been pretty amazing. So I've seen many changes over the years, and it's from traditional hand-drawn animation through to the CG birth of CG animation, and also trying to work out whether I still had a chance of remaining in this industry. And as luck would have it, having I guess an understanding of story and pre-production, I was able to carve a niche for myself in pre-production and direction over the years. So it's been a very good ride, I have to say. I've been very fortunate. I've had the great opportunity of working with so many wonderful friends and artists over the years. So it's been very good. But it's nice to be collaborating with you in this what we hope to be one of many shows that we'll be recording for those that are interested basically in animation, in the arts, certainly in the storyboarding and design, a lot of the pre-production that goes into these projects. And that's something that we hope to kind of delve into and explain a little bit more. So over to you.
Right on, Dino. It's great to have you here. Great to collaborate with you. Thank you so much for coming. And apologies for the brief intro. I'm just being mindful for time. But anyway, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm doing really well.
Dino, want to really dive in on this. I've got lots of questions I want to ask you, and I'm very excited to chat with you.
Sure.
So I know you have a lot of mileage, to say the least, in the industry of animation. and also live action. I want to know how and when did you first start in the animation industry?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I was studying graphic design at college, at Eastham College, back in the late 70s. And one of the projects that was put to us on the course was, you pick something that you have a passion for, and I kind of chose animation. I didn't know that much about it, but tapping into that subject, I realized, wow, this is something that really required strong draftsmanship, a sense of timing and everything else. And the little project that I started there was it was pretty terrible in terms of what I produced, but I could see that there was a spark of interest there for me, for sure. And at the end of the second year of the graphic design, 3-year graphic design course I was doing, at the end of the second year, I put the feelers out basically to see if there were any animation studios where I could get a job for the summer holidays as a runner. And as luck would have it, I was accepted by one animation company, and it worked out so well that they asked me to remain as a permanent sort of fixture in their studio. So basically, offer me a full-time job. So I made a decision right there and then to accept their offer, and notified the college. They weren't too happy about it. They wanted me to come back for the third year and to get the degree, but I knew this was a golden opportunity, and so I stuck to my guns, and I've never looked back since. So that's how I kind of broke into animation, and I spent about a year and a half, I guess, working there and learning the ropes, getting little bits of in-betweening and assistant work in animation, because at that time the process kind of worked in such a way that you would get your training on the job by basically learning from the more experienced animators and producers, etc. And so that was a very fortunate apprenticeship for me, because I learned the ropes. I was delivering artwork to the camera houses, to the editor, and learning each stage of production, as well as kind of delving in and helping out wherever I could on the artistic side. And after about a year and a half, I realized that I'd honed in my skills enough to kind of take the plunge and push myself into the freelance circuit. So I started to, I officially went freelance, and I started to work for different studios around, culminating into, I guess, the chance of working on my first animation feature, which was Asterix. And that was back in by that time it was about 1984. I landed the gig in Paris, and that was wonderful, because that afforded me the opportunity of working with so many great artists that are still friends to this day, and colleagues. So that was an incredible experience for me. It was a challenge. It was a real big challenge, because I was officially an animator on this feature, with maybe 25 or 30 other animators. So I had to hold my own and do the best I could. And at the time, we were also animating with the French dialogue. The audio was in French, and it was later dubbed. There was an English dubbed version. So we had to, learn to lip sync, using, basically for me, a foreign language. But it was a wonderful opportunity and experience, and one that I cherish to this day. And it sort of gained me a certain amount of ground and confidence, so that when I finally came back to the UK, back to London, I could continue in the freelance arena. And I began to animate and then direct my own commercials, etc. So that's basically how I kind of broke into the business, and that was back in the early 80s.
Nice. Yeah. Did you have to make a lot of cup of coffees for people in the beginning?
I did. My God, I mean, I mean, let me explain one thing. When I started at this first animation studio, it was a BM Animation. Barry Merritt was the owner of the company, and there was a wonderful, wonderful animator there who was my mentor. Is Barry Parker, and I owe Barry Parker so much because he really nurtured me. He really kind of looked after me and was a fantastic mentor, and he had a very relaxed approach to the animation. But my first role really when I started at the studio was a runner and a coffee maker, a tea maker. I could do that, not a problem. I was happy to make the teas and the coffees. Honestly, I was really happy just to
Someone's
be in
got
the
to do it.
studio. It was beautiful, but I was the worst runner. I mean, I was always getting lost. A trip that would take me 5 minutes, that should take me 5-10 minutes. It took me like half an hour, and my boss would often say, "Where have you been? where did you go?" And I said, "I'm sorry." Even though I had my A to Z, which was, we didn't have any iPhones then, that had navigating help. I had an A to Z, and I was terrible at reading maps, and so I was always getting lost, in Soho. I mean, it's terrible. I was the worst runner. But somehow they must have seen something in me, some sort of potential, so they kept me on. But yeah, it was very magical. I mean, I forgot to mention that when I first went for the interview at BM Animation, and it was a studio that was based in Soho Square, which was opposite to Richard Williams' studio. Richard Williams was the Oscar winner from Roger Rabbit, the animation director on Roger Rabbit for the Zemeckis and Disney's. So there was magic in many of these studios insofar as they had all this beautiful drawn artwork all up on their walls, and BM Animation, the studio that I worked at, was no different. I mean, I could almost hear the Disney music, like the it was magical, it was absolutely magical for me, and it kind of blew me away, and I knew instantly that this was the world for me. This was the industry that I wanted to be in, and I did everything I could possibly do in terms of extra work. I worked late into the evenings, many nights, just practicing and learning the craft of animation. I went to life drawing classes every week, to try and perfect my drawing skills. It was a very exciting time in the business. It was a rebirth, if you like, of animation in the early 80s.
You mentioned about drawing. Were you always into drawing? Like, when did you start drawing? Or when did you
Funny enough,
realize
I was. I know that you mentioned that you are a collector, an art collector of comics as well, and comics and art and Marvel for me was the birth of my own desire to draw. I originally, as a kid, I wanted to be an artist for Marvel. I mean, I was in love with all these graphic novels and these comics, particularly the artwork and the stories. My favorite Marvel artists. I mean, I loved Stan Lee. I loved a lot of his humor and his energy in the writing. But I loved, John Romita Sr. His art for me really spoke volume.
he is awesome.
And Steve Ditko, Jack Kirby. I mean, these were giants in their own ways. They were giants of art and animation. I mean, obviously
they still are.
They still are, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like discovering Norman Rockwell, or Frazetta, or for me, these Marvel artists, they really struggled in their own way, because I think each project they were given, they not only had to create the art, but they wrote a lot of the material as well. Often they didn't even receive an outline. They had to create that outline. They had to create that story. So in that respect, it was very different to, say, the way that DC would work with their artists. DC had a very strict outline or script that the artist would work from. But with Marvel, I think many of the artists at that time, back in the, I guess, 60s, they would flesh out the stories themselves as they were drawing the artwork. And for many of them, they had to produce a certain quota of work in order to be paid. So and they were supporting their families, so it was not easy, and it wasn't paid particularly well too. So my heart goes out to those guys. I mean, they really they carved a niche for themselves, but it wasn't easy at all. But that was the inspiration for me, definitely. Was drawing and copying art, and that was my basic anatomy. And then I was also drawing a lot from life. I was, drawing my parents, my brothers and sisters, of which I have many. I'm one of 7 siblings, so we're a large family, and that was great growing up. And in many ways, I was left to my own devices. So I was always in my bedroom drawing away and sketching. So so I definitely say that comics was my inspiration.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for sharing. What was the project that really put you on the map in terms of animation industry?
It's hard to say that it's one project. It's kind of an amalgamation of many, really. But I think as far as iconic projects, Space Jam would be one. Space Jam was a wonderful opportunity for the studio and for my partners at the time. I had two partners that were working with me, and at the time that I had Stardust Pictures, that we created Stardust Pictures. The animation studios I had in prior to that were Dino and just studios that I would always set up primarily to house a project. So by the time that Space Jam came along, a very, very good friend of mine, Rob Stephenhagen, who happened to be one of my partners as well, had a good link there with Max Howard, who was one of the main producers for Warner Brothers at the time. And also we were recommended by another very good friend, Uli Meyer, who at the time was very busy sort of crewing up within his own studio to house a good chunk of Space Jam. And when the producers at Warner Brothers were looking for more studios to help on Space Jam, Uli had recommended Stardust Pictures, myself and Rob and the other partner, Panagiotis Rappas, who was also, helping us as part of the team. So through their recommendation, we landed, I think it was around 2 minutes, or just over 2 minutes of animation on Space Jam. So we had to, very quickly crew up. We already had a semblance of a crew from having finished MGM's All Dogs Go to Heaven 2, which was my setup, and then we just kind of molded that into Stardust to accommodate Space Jam. So Space Jam definitely was an iconic, fantastic project to work on at the time. It allowed us an opportunity to work kind of fairly closely with Framestore. Framestore were housing, a lot of the kind of VFX and just compositing for the movie, and so we would collaborate with Framestore as well as Warner Brothers. I was flown to LA, with another colleague who was working with me closely on the timeout sequence and the fantasy sequence. We met with Ivan Reitman. The other colleague was Tony Tulipano, who was a fabulous, amazing artist, and he really helped me on the fantasy sequence as well.
Which looks amazing,
so,
by the way.
Yeah, it was great, and it gave me the opportunity to kind of design a comic look, basically, which was something that was very close to my heart. So a comic, animated version of Michael Jordan. So I could design the look of that, and Ivan Reitman kind of liked it. Who was the main guru on that project. He was the main overall producer, and in many ways was directing that along with Joe Pitka, I think. So I think that was quite an iconic project. And the other one I would say would be the Hunger Games. And again, the Hunger Games came via a strong recommendation from another very good friend of mine, Eamon Butler, who was at the time head of animation at Double Negative. And Double Negative is an amazing VFX and character-driven studio, and they're handling their own features as well as VFX. And but at the time, Eamon, I think, was heavily entrenched in Disney's John Carter on Mars, and he was heading up all of the character and VFX animation on that. And and so he I think it was first, Hunger Games was first offered to him, and he couldn't do it, so he recommended me. And it was a scout that approached me, and from Australia, and because the studio was based out of Australia, but it was Lionsgate that really were pushing for an animation supervisor or director that had creature experience or character experience, and the studio at the time didn't, and so they wanted someone to kind of head up the animation side for the Hunger Games on the first film, and so I was the lucky candidate for that. And
that one you were on site, right?
I was initially flown to Australia to set up the team, or to kind of work closely with the team. But they found out while I was out there that I had experience also in design and in storyboarding, and so they were having some issues with the previs that was produced for the sequence with the mutt attack, and Gary Ross, the director, wonderful director, was not happy with that version, so he wanted the whole thing reboarded, storyboarded from scratch. So I was flown halfway across the world again to North Carolina in the US, and literally I was dropped in the trenches, so to speak. I arrived, I think, something like 11 o'clock at night, totally jet lagged. The next day I had to start work at 8 a.m. On set in the woods, where they were shooting in North Carolina, where they were shooting the Hunger Games. And so I started boarding straight away, and collaborating really closely with Gary and Sheena Dougal. I met Sheena Dougal, who was the overall VFX supervisor, who was incredible. She was amazing, and she really knew her stuff, and we got on like a house on fire, got on really well. And I really I felt I connected really well with Gary as well. I found him to be an incredible visionary. His direction was very, very clear and precise. And so he only mentioned a few things, and I, straight away got, what it was that he wanted, And so with my brush pen and my thousands of boards, I just bashed out a whole version that based on Gary's initial pitch, and that became the mutt attack sequence. And my claim to fame, I guess, was and a proud moment for me is when Gary, we had the whole sequence pinned up on boards, just around the set of the Hunger Games for the attack for the Mutt attack, and Gary pitched the whole sequence to around 180 crew members, and there was a standing ovation at the end of it, which was a proud moment for him and for me, having boarded the whole thing. So I have a lot of great memories from that movie.
Were you boarding from a tent?
I was boarding from a tent, from Gary's trailer at times. At times, we, the producer and I would meet at Gary's apartment, at the crack of dawn, very early in the morning, and we would work together.
Wow.
And sometimes, Gary was so, relaxed at that point. I think, he liked those little kind of moments away from the craziness of what was happening. And so, Gary would often say, I make an amazing espresso. And I said, well, I'll have one then. And you go. So there I was, sat in Gary's apartment, and he's making this beautiful espresso for, and sometimes he would whisk up a wonderful breakfast. And it was great, and I think it was a nice kind of relaxed approach we had to this collaboration. And when you're focused and when you're relaxed, when you're avoiding, unnecessary politics, etc. I think that's when the gold comes out. That's when you can produce the best stuff.
What would you say was the biggest project you worked on? Because just now you mentioned you just dropped on a Space Jam, Hunger Games. These things are huge. I watched them. I'm a huge fan.
To be honest, I never really look at it that way. I think initially, say, having the luck and it's all about timing as well. When I got the call to work on Aladdin, the Will Smith Aladdin, I was in Cyprus having a break, and I received a message from a very good friend of mine and collaborator. I worked with Adam Broderick, who was the production manager on Aladdin, Disney Aladdin, and I first worked with Adam, many years before on The Sorcerer's Apprentice, when he was himself an apprentice editor. He was studying to be a creative editor, and now, funny enough, he's this very, very prolific production manager on all these big, huge blockbuster movies. And he's an incredible guy. Over the years, I've worked with quite a few crew members that you can really see they're worth their weight in gold. And Adam's definitely one of these guys, because he's so focused, and he's able to handle a huge volume of work and delegate it to other crew members, and he commands a lot of respect, because he's the type of guy that you're in good hands with this guy. He really can handle his department well, the VFX department, really well. So as luck would have it, I was on holiday in Cyprus, and Adam calls me or texts me and says, would you be available to work on a Disney project? And I said, well, I'm on a break at the moment. I was hoping to take a break, and he was kind of pushing me a little bit. This would be a cool project. Can I put your name forward? I said, well, look, put my name forward, Adam, by all means. But I'm not sure when I might be available. And then I get a call from the VFX producer. So she called me. And then Chaz, who was the main VFX producer, finally contacted me again. Yeah, all during the time I was in Cyprus. And so eventually they won me over, and I agreed to work on the project. And I'm so happy that I did, because it ended up being a wonderful project. I really enjoyed working on it. And so I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to be the main, architect initially at the beginning for the Friend Like Me sequence, to come up with ideas and gags, and then flesh that out into a storyboard stroke animatic. But at the beginning stages, it was great, because I was sat in the meeting room sometimes, in the screening room, and I had Will Smith, on my right, and and
Oh,
Guy
wow.
Ritchie on my left, and Chaz there, and we were just all collaborating, coming up with ideas, and it was great,
That's
a
amazing.
really great
Yeah.
opportunity. So,
Yeah.
but equally, I've had wonderful times when I worked on Treasure Island with Simon, and previous to working with Simon, I had the opportunity of creating Treasure Island, the first series, when I was the sole director on that film, collaborating with another really good friend of mine, John Martin, who had been working with the producer on developing the project in the first place. And then I came on board. John recommended me. I came on board as the main overall director. And then suddenly I found I was, designing and kind of helping even with bits and pieces with the writing, as well as, collaborating with the studio in the Philippines. So it was a wonderful, that was a wonderful experience. And also it was my first stab at voice directing. So, with Chris Barry, with John, okay, the names now, Dawn French, Robert Powell, who was Jesus of Nazareth. It's like I was working with Jesus, I grew up watching Jesus of Nazareth, and it was one of the best and most iconic features ever to portray, Jesus Christ. Wonderful. I mean, I highly recommend,
Classic.
watching that again. I watched it recently. A couple of weeks ago. And it blew me away, absolutely blew me away. I mean, maybe it was a good job I hadn't watched it recently when I was directing Robert Powell, because, he's phenomenal. Richard E. Grant was another actor, voice actor on the series Treasure Island. And Hugh Laurie, Hugh Laurie was wonderful to work with. I found Hugh Laurie extremely professional to work with. He was
Nice.
wonderful,
Nice.
all of them.
Yeah.
So, and
So
I think Juliet Stevenson as well. And Peter Lewis was the producer was a young producer on the show as well. And at the time we collaborated really well. So it was a really again another wonderful opportunity for me. And when we came into the second series, even on the first series, I managed to pull Simon on to help me on the storyboarding side.
okay.
And I think even Alan Kurzweil, another great artist. So when you're in the seat as a director, you're afforded often you're afforded the opportunity to recommend talent that would be instrumental in realizing a project, rather than having to sometimes work with there's a lot of great talent out there, don't get me wrong, wonderful talent, but sometimes the collaboration and it doesn't always go well. And not to say that's substandard talent, but I think when you can handpick the crew like you can in live action, in animation, it's just as important to find people that you can collaborate and work well with, but that can also, deliver the goods.
Yeah.
Very
It's not a woman job, right? I mean, you get
no, it's team. It's a
as a
teamwork.
team. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So,
a teamwork thing.
so
And that goes for great producers, great production managers, everyone is instrumental. Working with great editors, that can help to flesh out the look and feel. When you work with, that was one of the great things I remember working with Adam, even on the Sorcerer's Apprentices. Adam was great at finding and sourcing some wonderful sound effects, as well as the music, which kind of really embellished the visuals and creates a wonderful bed for the visuals to kind of sit on.
So I know, I didn't know you actually met Will Smith on set, and that's really cool. I actually didn't realize how much time you spent on set or interacted with actors. I mean, I know you met Jennifer Lawrence, right? I know you have some photos with her at Hunger Games, but also Will Smith. And obviously, being flown to Australia as well. So what was the most fun you had in a project? How much fun did you have?
Well,
It's
that's
fascinating.
interesting. Actually, one of the most enjoyable times was, I mean, I was very lucky to work with Brown Bag in Dublin, and when they asked me to help as episodic director on Peter Rabbit, the second season, and so I was episode director on all 56 episodes, and right at the beginning, when we had the pre-pro meetings, we were going through many of the scripts with the producers and the executive producers at Silvergate, and one of the shows in particular, and we had, I think, one or two actors at these meetings as well, reading through the scripts, and one script in particular was so heavily loaded with characters. It had so many characters, and in this one episode there were three mice, and a female mouse and two brothers. I think they were all kind of siblings probably, but anyway, they asked if I would read one of the characters to help, because there were just so many characters. So I did, and as we went and recorded these reading sessions, I just went into a character of this one mouse, and I happened to have the female mouse, and so I gave it like oh hello, like almost the Queen. I'm the Queen of England, and everyone giggled and laughed, but I kept the character all the way through, and it got some giggles and laughter, and at the end, Silvergate had sort of asked the question, had anyone been cast for the mice characters, and Dave McCamley, who was the overall series director, was cast to play one of the mouse characters, and then I was cast to play because I had the audition, and I think they must have liked it, the version, and so anyway, I won the gig to voice one of the characters. In the end, I ended up voicing the other brother, and David.
That's awesome.
And it was fun, but that was the most fun I had, because when we started the recording, we met the recording agent, the voice director, sorry, and she's based out of New York, and for the life of me, her name escapes me, but she was such a lovely lady. And so we were always constantly laughing when we were, just working and collaborating together. But we had to do a link there, so she would direct me as I was in the booth in Dublin. And often she'd be laughing, between takes, and she would say to me, "Oh, Dino, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing with you. This is such fun." And it was the most enjoyable part of the whole directing process, was producing these voices, I have to say.
Yeah.
And I've officially got a title as an actor now on IMDb. It's hilarious.
Well done.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So it's funny. Fun. It's when you're talking about the voice acting, right? Because I know you had to wear many different hats throughout your career, and especially running your own animation company. So what would you say, what would you pick as your favorite role in animation, and why?
Well, it's I guess collaborating with the crew, I think, and working with artists and just the crew in general. I think it's I think one of the things that you have to learn very quickly is that when you're running a studio and you're collaborating with a team, you need to kind of try and instill confidence and support and manage expectations, not only from the crew members but also from clients. So to know what's possible within a given time and budget. but I think, once you've won a gig and you've got the project, and you're putting the team together, I think it's making it so it's work, and it's a job, but it's still enjoyable. It's something that's a process that you hope that you can create a wonderful team, um, and a group that can see that vision, and can achieve that vision, an ultimate goal, and hopefully will make the clients very happy with the end result. So I guess collaborating with the crew is one of the biggest fun parts. And also, I think, when I'm just simply storyboarding or designing, you start with a blank canvas, so to speak, with either a blank panel, or sometimes we're working directly in the computer, and anything's possible then. It's like, it's almost like the world is your oyster. You can either make or break this thing. So you hope that when you're given the brief, that it's clear enough for you to carve out the right bit of business, the right staging, that will give, I guess, the director exactly what they want. And often when you're working with directors, they're not always 100% clear about what it is they want. That's why they want a couple of different versions. And Guy Ritchie, for example, is very, very much that way. He likes to see 2 or 3 different versions, or maybe more sometimes, before he'll pick the one that he likes. And that's cool. That's fine, because sometimes you're blitzing different various ideas. Sometimes you go, well, I'm sure this idea is going to be better, but I've got to appease what the director or the producers want, and come up with a couple of different versions, and hopefully they will pick the one that will be better. But sometimes it's really hard to kind of pinpoint one great thing that you like the best about the business, but it's I guess when they're happy with the end results, that makes me happy.
So I know you've worked in many different countries over the years, right? I mean, even in Canada, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite country that you lived and worked in? And how does it work as well? Like, sorry, do they fly you over to the studios or the filming locations to make the movies, or do you normally work from your studio?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, if definitely sort of over the years, if a project is happening in the US, say for example, if it's Warner Brothers or Disney's or DreamWorks, they would fly you over, and how do you put, with DreamWorks, it was often at the Oakwood Apartments, which was a great complex. It's where everyone begins their journey of working in America, or working certainly in Hollywood. Is usually the Oakwood Apartments, because they're self-contained apartments where many of the crew end up being based before they eventually get their own apartments. But often the studios will cover that expense as a part of a relocation.
You start in a basement and then you work your way up.
No, it was often, I think the one thing about many of the American studios, they really did look after the talent. I mean, they really do look after you, and because they know that in looking after you, they'll get the best out of you. If you're struggling, if you're unhappy, being put somewhere really kind of pokey and like you say, like a basement somewhere, you're not going to be operating at your best. And if you're expected to deliver straight away, having just arrived, say with DreamWorks, many times when I would be flown out there, they would allow me a certain amount of time to kind of get over the jet lag. They wouldn't expect vast amounts of work, the next day, the day after you've arrived. But often once you arrive there, you're kind of buzzed, you're kind of very excited about the new project, and you're wanting to prove yourself and show your best in a way. So but yeah, they would, for me, God, I mean, I remember the times when I would arrive at DreamWorks, and they would say, "Oh, your car's ready." And at the time, I wasn't even driving, so I was fearful. I wasn't the best, but it was a very good friend of mine, Reg Boudage, who is one of the great story artists at Pixar at the moment. Reg is an amazing friend and artist, and I've known him over the years. We first, in fact, worked together on Asterix back in 1984, and we even shared an apartment together at times. So, Reg was working at DreamWorks at the time, and he was really encouraging and supportive with my fear of driving, And if it wasn't for Reg, I wouldn't have driven anywhere, And so he was, very, very patient with me, and I'm sure he found it quite hilarious too, being in the passenger seat with me driving.
Is it hilarious or scared?
Both. Yeah, both. No, I think in the end I was okay. My driving was okay. God, I've seen a lot worse, but because I never kind of grew up with driving. I didn't start at an early age, and so it was always a bit of a stigma with me. It was always a bit of a kind of block. And in the UK, in London, we don't really need to drive. There's good transport with buses and underground trains and overground trains, etc.
So I guess it must be really weird for you or for anyone from UK to then, let's say, go to the US, and now you need to drive on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
Or on the correct side, whatever you're.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that. But also, the very first time that I arrived in Los Angeles was on one of the not so wonderful projects, I have to say. Maybe I won't even mention it, but it was back in the I guess early 80s when I arrived in Los Angeles. I was picked up by one of the production managers who was really Mr. LA. He had driving with one arm on the door and the other just.
Was he wearing a white suit?
No, not a white suit, but he was Mr. LA, and the whole trip from the airport to the studio, he kept telling me how wonderful and amazing Hollywood was and LA was, and how wonderful he was. And he said he had Billy Crystal on his baseball team, and at that time I didn't even know who Billy Crystal, the actor, was, the comedian. Right. I was so starry-eyed, I just kept going, oh my God, look how wide the streets are, look, wow. And I was picked up in this, wonderful convertible car, and incredibly starry-eyed, and yeah, I guess this guy was a bit of a goof, to be honest. Yeah, and yeah, but it was it was.
I wonder if he's watching now.
Yeah, and the two bosses, there was a husband and wife team, and the first time I met them, when the first day I was in the studio, I was a couple of friends, we were working in this one room together, and in comes the two bosses on this film, which I won't mention, and they both, can you imagine, I'm seeing them for the first time, husband and wife, and they're both talking into a styrofoam cup, because they had colds and they were chewing raw garlic. And so I guess it was nice of them to kind of but that's my first impression of them. And they were like, hi, how's it going? And they're speaking into these styrofoam cups. And I'm thinking, is this a joke? And it was funny stories after that too.
It's always nice to hear these things that you just don't expect you're gonna hear.
Yeah, it was the first time I got into I think a car crash too, and it literally was the first week, and we were going to lunch, and I wasn't driving, by the way. As another good friend, Glenn Kennedy, was driving, and I was in the car, I think with Phil Valentine, another excellent friend who's now a professor of animation. He's teaching animation at Hatfield University, which is not too far from me, in I think North London. And so we're in the car coming back from lunch, and we pull up, getting ready to turn into the parking lot. And so we're almost parked with the hazard lights on, ready to turn. Slam! A car slams into the back of us, and we all go jolting forward, and then we quickly get out the car, and then there's a car behind us, and your man gets out of it, and he's a Mexican chap, and he's going, "Oh man, I'm sorry, man, I'm sorry, I've got no brakes, man." I'm thinking, oh my god, he's driving a car with no brakes. He says, "I'm sorry, man, I got no brakes." And that's the very first time I heard Glenn Kennedy, and I heard the term, this is in the early 80s, I heard the term loser, because Glenn says, "Hey man, what are you, some kind of loser?" And that's when the guy says, "I'm sorry, man, I've got no brakes.
Oh
Man,
my
I've got
God.
no brakes." And just the whole thing just got worse after that. So Glenn calmed down. He was driving the car, and then out of nowhere, this guy comes out from the neighborhood, and he's rolling up his sleeves. I kid you not, he's rolling up his sleeves. He goes, "Hey man, I've seen the whole goddamn thing. It's his fault. You should sue him. You should sue him." And then this Mexican chap turns around and says, "Hey man, what are you? It's got nothing to do with you, man." He goes, "Yes, it has." And he's rolling up his sleeves. Says, "I saw the whole goddamn thing." And then we're the ones trying to calm the whole thing down. It's so crazy. But that was just one of many, many stories. So to me, the whole thing was like a pantomime. It really was like a pantomime. I was happy to be there, because it was like being in a film.
I have no idea when I first heard the expression loser, but it's fine. Let's carry on.
And yeah, I mean, that's a derogatory term. We shouldn't be using that, but that was just the first time I ever heard it, and I thought that's so fun.
We were talking about drawing earlier, and storyboards, right? And I know you've drawn countless of storyboards over the years, which I imagine you would receive clear briefs or direction, or some sort of guidance during the production, right? But what about the concept art? Because I know you had to draw a lot of concept art as well. So where do you find inspiration for those drawings? And also, what type of guidance do you receive when you have to create a concept art?
With concept art, I mean, it's its own unique obstacle, I guess, in many ways. You want to get inside the head of that character and understand what that character is all about before you start designing it. And I think in many ways, it's wrong to design a character first and then try and, you want to know what it is what are the traits of that character? Why is this character in the film in the first place? And then that will start to inform the designer, insofar as what that character is going to be about. Say if it's a 10-year-old boy, and he's quite boisterous, quite athletic, that would kind of streamline the thought process. Or if it's a bully, and he's quite big and hunky, that would also inform the designer and give the designer an idea. Sometimes the writers, or sometimes the director and producers have a very clear idea of what they want. Some designers actually kind of also will flesh out shapes first before they start building the details around that, so everyone's slightly different. I guess for me, it's kind of like the storyboarding. I want to understand what the brief is. I want to get as clear a brief as possible. In doing that, you kind of avoid a lot of wasted time, and frustrations there for the producers and the directors, because often they would say time is money, and if there's a strict deadline, a strict budget, they can't afford to be paying, if it's and the salaries to try and kind of define a character. And sometimes you get a set, you would get a set price, to design a character, so you're very regimented within your process yourself. Like I would be, I would set aside a certain amount of time to rough out and blanket a whole look development, flesh out very roughly what these characters or character would look like, and then present that after a day or two, and then based on the ones that the director or the producers will like, then I will home that design in more. So it's a certain amount of back and forth, really. But you hope that, like in the storyboarding, you've got a fairly clear brief to start off with.
I'm also curious, without going into details on the hiring process, right? But when you're getting selected for a project, does your style or the quality of your drawing play a part on that, or is mostly due to your experience, name? Obviously, you're well known in the industry, or maybe even further, is that related to your ability to understand the guidance or the expectation and translating to drawing? Where's the way on this?
I think it's a bit of everything, really. I mean, I would say 9 times out of 10, I get recommendations. I get word of mouth. I've never really had to advertise myself, luckily, and I think it all stems probably from the very early days of, I guess, putting myself out there on the freelance circuit. And when things would kind of, it's not even waiting for things to dry up before you start making the move elsewhere. But I was always lucky, I think, in my timing that I would get asked by a friend, "Hey, there's a project happening here in the States. Are you interested?" Or I get a call, we're having some issues training and these guys in the Philippines. Could you come and help? And by doing that, you get known almost on a worldwide kind of basis, because the animation industry is huge, but it's small at the same time in terms of there's a certain finite caliber of artists, creatives that that you can kind of bank on to deliver and produce the goods. And also many times the role is not always so specific, insofar as you get asked to kind of storyboard on a project, but then you're also asked to design or maybe do bits of animation on there, or maybe the boarding turns into blocking of animation. If, for example, when I recently worked on Tom and Jerry, that started off as a boarding. We were boarding whole sequences on the film, both the live action elements as well as the animation elements. I mean, primarily the animation elements, but often there was a crossover of having to work out the live action so the whole thing would marry. But as we continued, once the live action was shot, we then would get the live action plates back, the shots that were approved, and we would then start working in the computer, using Photoshop or whatever tools you need to use in order to go over the live action plates and start to drop in the animation elements. So so that's the so sometimes one job merges into another. Yeah.
Interesting. And the other thing else I'm curious is, so I saw a lot of your art, and looking at the boards for Hunger Games, Sorcerer's Apprentice, we can identify a style, right? There are similarities, or Artemis Fowl as well, right? And then when I look at Tom and Jerry, perhaps because the boards are mostly obviously Tom and Jerry and not actual humans, then I see a bit of a different style there, as well as even Aladdin. So would you be able to actually define your style?
Well, I think if I was to define my style, I would say it's very much almost like a pen, a comic book approach. I feel my style lends itself well more to live action. It's not to say that I'm not equally comfortable doing animation boards, but I feel like an affinity with live action in a way, because I don't know, I think it's maybe it derives from the roots and the inspiration of graphic comics, graphic novels, comics in general, and that real kind of blocked, strong sort of draftsmanship kind of approach. In many ways, you can get away with a lot when you're animating and you're creating animation boards. You license to almost bend the rules, kind of apply way more in the animation circuit. But with live action, I think you have to be very respectful for many of the rules. I mean, often I'm crossing the line, and that's something that I need to always keep checking on. But because I think often when I'm spontaneously kind of blasting through boards, I'm often trying not to be distracted by too many rules. I just want to flesh out the whole sequence and get that spontaneity and that energy. And then I'll go back and correct things where it may be crossing the line, or it may be, pushing an angle more. I think the thing that we, especially in live action boarding, what we want to avoid is the mediocre, the generic. You want to try and get something that's kind of dynamic and pleasing to the eye, something appealing, like an appealing design or appealing panel is not necessarily just something that's cute. And that's something that was also defined by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston, two great animators of the Disney era.
And you do that well.
Sorry,
I mean, you do that very well. I mean, your pieces, they're something that they will look great on any wall. So I understand what you're saying by avoiding the generic and actually creating something of quality, something appealing to the eye. And I'm very fortunate to own some of your pieces, and absolutely they look great on the wall.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying that. That's very nice of you to say that. I mean, what all of us, in this business strive for is not only to create great drawings. That's not really what it's about. When you're storyboarding, both for live action and animation, or for whatever media, I think your main goal is to tell a story, in the best way possible, and to create entertaining sequences that will help the story along, place the character in the right geography in the and get the right kind of angles that will maximize the impact that you're trying to get across. In many ways, when you're boarding, you're kind of like the cinematographer. You're conscious of staging, where the character's placed, if it's an extreme close up, or if it's a mid or wide shot, when you've got dialogue happening, what's an interesting way to play one against the other without actually, again, falling into that generic over-shoulder shot. Over-shoulder shots are good and they work for what they are, but there's always more interesting ways. Brad Bird, is a great director and visionary, and he's wonderful at, portraying these, wonderful and creating these wonderful sequences where the camera or the character leads the camera and vice versa. Very clever ways to sell a bit of business. So it's actually a craft that you're forever perfecting. You're never there. You never stop learning, and you never really truly reach a point where you go, now I've reached that point, I'm good enough. You never stop, and I think in some ways, it's a hard thing to say. I don't always believe that this is the case, but you're as good as your last job, you know, or you're as good as your last sequence that you just produce or board, or your design or whatever. And so you've always got to maintain a very high standard. And the person that you're working to and against really is yourself. You know, you're the one that raises that standard, not the people necessarily you're working for. It's you. And and that's true of anything. If you're cooking, you know, if you're writing a book or an essay, you know, you want to get to that perfect line, or that to get that perfect taste or perfect mix in you know, in your preparation of food.
Yeah. Were you ever asked to redo art in which you thought was perfect as it was, but for whatever reason, you're asked to change and format the look, and you had your ground like, no, I think it's fine as it is, or something like that?
Oh, that's a good question, and it's a very tricky one, because you've always got to remain professional, and you've always got to respect in a way, the chain of command. If the director wants something a certain way and you don't necessarily agree, and you feel, you know, another way is better, you first got to do the director's version, and then if you have time, create your version and say, I've got an alternative version just in case, you know. And you know, I would say 9 times out of 10 they go, wow, yeah, that does work better. Because if you boarded something one way, and then suddenly you go, oh my god, I think there's a better way to do this, and if within the time constraints and budget you can actually produce that version, then that's great. And you know, because it's all about perfecting your art and perfecting the final vision for the director and the producers, you know. So but you've got to also respect the chain of command, and even if it's steering the project in the wrong way. I mean, I remember the on All Dogs Go to Heaven 2, for example, when the writers were also the producers of that, and they'd written a line for Carface, and I figured, you know, and it was a bit of dialogue that Carface has with Red, which is the villain, the main villain. And in the previous film, in All Dogs Go to Heaven 1, the main villain was Carface. And so the lines that they had come up with for Carface, I thought were kind of a little bit weak. And so I suggested that they omit that gag or that particular line. And I presented the case that Carface was the main, as I said, the main villain in the previous film. The lines you've given him are just almost a sidekick, you know, and it weakens the character in many ways. And luckily they agreed, and they took that out, and they came up with another line which was kind of better. So so sometimes you hope that you have you know, a wonderful collaboration or a relationship with the crew, with the director, that you can suggest that, and you know, and sometimes I would have these conversations even with Gary when we were working, you know, closely together on Hunger Games, and he was wonderful. But you know, as I say, everything that guy had in terms of a vision was sound, was bang on, which is why I think the whole thing was such a successful franchise. You know,
Absolutely, yeah. What is something that you'd like to try in the industry that you haven't yet?
I would, yeah, I guess I think every animator and every I guess directing animator aspires to land their own directing gig, I guess, at some point. Although I've directed, you know, short little bits and sequences, I've never really had the opportunity, other than being the animation director on a whole film, working closely with Paul Boger, who was the overall director on Happily Never After, and that was a great collaboration, wonderful, and we're close friends to this day. That was the first time I met Paul on Happily Never After, and yeah, another wonderful, incredible talent. But yeah, I think it would be fun. It would have to be the right project, and one that would, allow me to, I guess, spread my wings and direct a project, and again, surround myself with the right talent pool. And equally, that's for an animated feature, but also I would love to animate a live action project at some point too. And I think one of the biggest pluses, although one could argue you've never really directed a big project before. Well, in many ways, I've been instrumental in so many big blockbuster projects that, and so the trust was always there to handle big sequences. So it's not a stretch to imagine one could take on a bigger project. But the great thing is, especially with live action, is you can, we can actually board when we can storyboard. We're as I said before, in many ways, we can tap into almost the cinematography of that and the staging and collaborate with actors. And because in many ways, when you animate, you're effectively the actor, that you're drawing the action. So you're effectively becoming the actor and performing the business. So yeah, I think that would be wonderful. If it happens, great. If it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I've been blessed over the years to have kind of worked on so many cool projects, large and small. So,
Well, if hopefully that happens, and if that ever happens, you get to sit on the big chair. Let me know. I'll be happy to be the person bringing the coffee.
Well, if it does, believe you me, it would be amazing. It would be the best film ever made, probably.
Hey, so talking about work, can you share any of your current projects or future projects?
Not really. There's not that much to kind of to say. A few things on the pipeline, but NDAs means I can't really say too much. But I think the collaboration between you and I is something that's quite exciting as well. And the selling of art is something that's kind of a cool project. And whilst there's some work already on eBay through Pop King, which is kind of fantastic with Steve, but presenting original artwork into some galleries, I think would be kind of cool. So and that's something that we're looking at the moment too. So there's quite a few things on the horizon in the pipeline. And perhaps if we continue these videos, I think the audiences will find out more.
Yeah, for sure. That good
Cool.
point. So Dino, besides having a chat about the stuff you did and understanding more about what goes on behind the scenes with filming, it would be nice to be able to help our viewers that are interested in getting into animation. And by the way, some of our future videos will focus on the more technical aspects of animation to really help those wanting to get into the industry. So my question is, where would you tell those wanting to get into this business to get started, besides making sure to subscribe to our channel, of course?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Hit the like button, of course, and subscribe, and hopefully we'll be able to elaborate with more ideas. But certainly, I think if there's a desire to get into the business, or if you're currently studying, there's so many wonderful tutorials on YouTube. If you can chisel away at your drawing skills, the better you can draw, I think the better you can visualize your ideas. So going back to basics in drawing, I think is key. Even if you want to get into probably producing or production managing or working in VFX or just animation in general, or storyboarding, pre-production, I think it's always good. I think it always helps you if you have an understanding of the craft of film and animation, and definitely next to that would be having draftsmanship, because you can convey your ideas even if you're going to be behind the camera. If you're shooting and directing, if you can thumbnail, like even Hitchcock was able to do some matchstick kind of thumbnail and staging, and James Cameron is wonderful with that, and Ridley Scott, all incredible directors, but
Absolutely.
they have strong links with storyboarding and being able to draw. So to me, that's key before you go into any sort of further avenues of learning. It's looking yourself and see what it is that you have as a basic skill, and see if you can tap into that and build on that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And sure, there's certain animation courses and universals, both online and courses that you can enroll to get a one-to-one or group collaboration. That's always a plus. But as I say, for me, I was very fortunate that I learned my craft in an animation studio as an apprentice, and if you're able to get in, even as a runner, in any animation studio or film studio or live action set, then that's the best way. That is the best way to learn, but I think probably in our next video we can maybe create links, because I don't know how many people will be watching our YouTube video, and your location may be different to mine. So if I suggest a few from the UK, and if you're not from the UK, that's not really going to really help you unless you're going to relocate. So my best thing is advice is to look on YouTube, research tutorials, and again, we can suggest that certain people to kind of also follow that are great, wonderful talents, colleagues, people that I know. And as Robbie had suggested and mentioned earlier, we hope in future videos that we will have some guests, some key speakers that are major industry artists, and people that I've had the pleasure of working with, and I've already spoken to a few of them, and they would be more than happy to come on and be interviewed. So that's hopefully coming up.
Yeah, definitely. There's going to be lots of content coming up for sure. This is very exciting. Dino, thank you so much for the chat. I really appreciate that, and I really look forward to talking to you again soon. By the way, our next video will be an interview with Dino, talking exclusively about his work in the original 1996 Space Jam, which is not classic and part of so many people's childhood, like myself. So make sure to subscribe to our channel, and to also follow Dino Athanassiou on his Instagram. I'll put the link below. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and please feel free to drop a comment below and let us know what your interests are, what you'd like us to talk about, or what you'd like to see in our future videos. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to write to us. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.